In the tranquility of the night, some stories quietly come to life. Welcome to Hauntings and Horrors. Now, I will take you through a chilling tales. Lily Evans was sitting in her bedroom, mindlessly looking through the latest issue of a well-known modeling magazine. Lily, since she was a child, she'd always dreamt of being featured in a magazine like this. Her mother had always encouraged her, but she could and Lily quite find the big one that would give her the chance that she needed. Up until now, she had to be content with local photo shoots for obscure advertisements and public applications. It wasn't much, but it helped to pay the bills. As Lily was lost in thought, the sound of her phone buzzing on her coffee table broke through the haze. She threw the magazine onto the table and quickly grabbed the phone in her hand. It was an email. She rolled her eyes slightly. She was getting a lot of spam emails lately, no doubt this would be another. Pressing the mail icon with her index finger, she couldn't believe Lily her eyes. Lily, since imitating one of his pieces for a high school art project, she'd always admired the work of Author Pascal. His stunning marble piece on the beauty of the female form was breathtaking. She often found herself poring over pictures of his latest pieces online. The email was from his personal email address. She initially thought it must be a scam, but she wondered how someone would have known what he meant to her. Looking at the email further, she read on. My dear, I was very fortunate to discover some of your work in a local magazine. I must say, I was instantly captivated by your natural beauty and form. As you may be aware, I'm very secretive about my muses and inspirations. I'm looking for a subject for an upcoming personal project of mine, and I'm inquiring as to whether you would be interested in being that subject. I can't emphasize enough that this is highly confidential until the work is released to the public, so your discretion is much appreciated. I'm willing to pay a handsome sum for your services. I'd like you to model exclusively for me over Lily Ral days, after which point I will compensate you for the fee of 100,000. I trust that my completed piece will sell for far in excess of this, so this will benefit both of us greatly. If you're interested in becoming my muse, please contact me at your earliest opportunity. Kindest regards, VP. This had come completely out of the blue, but it was just the chance she'd been waiting for to actually have the chance to work with such a famous artist as Mr. Pascal. I was unbelievable. The incredible payment was just the cherry on top. Without a second thought, Lily replied to the email in haste, asking for more information and expressing her gratitude for being considered. After letting out a deep breath, soon after clicking send, Lily got up slowly and walked to the kitchen of her tiny studio flat. Just as she was pouring the milk into her steaming cup of tea, her phone buzzed yet again. It couldn't be him already, could it? Padding over to the table, she lifted the phone and checked the notification. It was true. Within just minutes of her responding, he'd come back to her. He must be eager, she thought. Arthur had provided his personal contact number and asked if Lily was willing to meet with him at his studio the following day to discuss the project in detail. And with that, they both exchanged Lily more emails and texts throughout the day to arrange her visit. It came out in conversation that his studio was actually in his home, and she couldn't belly Lily her luck that she was actually going to see inside the personal quarters of an artistic genius. Lily could hardly sleep that night. She tossed and turned, wondering about how this opportunity could change her life for the better. And so, with that, the next day Lily arrived at Arthur Pascal's studio, a sprawling mansion located on the outskirts of town on a remote road. She'd Lily been in these parts before. The building exuded an old-world charm, complete with ivy crawling up its stone walls and large ornate windows in between. After taking a moment to take in her surroundings, she rang the doorbell. Just moments later, the door swung open to our Arthur himself. Arthur was a notorious recluse, and he felt honored to be one of the few people to see him in the flesh. He was taller than her and very thin. She was struck by his sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through her. His hair was pure silver, and he had an air of elegance about him, despite his somewhat intimidating appearance. He greeted her warmly and invited her inside. "My dear girl, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you," he said, placing his hand between her shoulder blades. "I've been an advocate for your work for some time now, and I must say I'm captivated by your simple yet pure presence. I believe, Lily, you are the perfect muse for my latest project." Lily hardly knew what to say. She was lost for words. After a brief pause that seemed like an eternity to her, she whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Pascal. The pleasure is all mine. I'm honored that you're a fan of my work. Please, call me Arthur," he said with a disarming smile. "Tom, let me show you around and explain what I have in mind." With that, and with his hand still placed firmly between her shoulders, he led her through the impressive mansion, on the way pointing out various pieces of artwork that adorned the walls. Each piece was more stunning than the last. How Lily are. She didn't have much time to admire each piece before Arthur's hand pressed against her back, urging her onwards. Lily and Wally. They reached a large, airy studio with a skylight. Rays of the afternoon sun beamed in, illuminating the room in a refreshing natural light. Easels, canvases, and half-finished sculptures were scattered around the room. It was fascinating to see how such a genius worked. "This is where the magic happens," Arthur said, openly gesturing around the room. "My current obsession is the notion of beauty and timelessness. I'm creating pieces that feel truly alive, as if the subject is frozen in a moment of pure perfection." Lily nodded, intrigued by his vision. Arthur's eyes gleamed with excitement as they met hers. "I want to create an eternal image of you, my dear. You have such unique features, ones that rival the Mona Lisa herself. But don't fret, the process is very simple. I use a series of plaster molds. It won't take much time at all, dear, but I assure you the result will certainly be worth it." The prospect of being immortalized in one of Arthur Pascal's masterpieces was far too good to pass up. Almost immediately, Lily agreed to the project, and they both spent the next few hours discussing the finer details and logistics. He was meticulous in his explanations. He'd clearly done this many times before. "May I see the pieces you've made before?" Lily asked. She was curious to know what the finished product would look like. "All in good time, my dear," Arthur exclaimed with an almost dismissive wave of his hand. As the sun began to set, Arthur showed Lily to a guest room where she'd be staying for a few nights while the piece was being completed. The room was lavishly decorated, complete with a luxurious four-poster bed and en-suite bathroom. This was a massive step up from her humble bedroom. "Make yourself at home," Arthur said. "My staff will make anything you wish for meals. Simply use the phone. We'll begin the first session tomorrow morning. Rest well, dear, you have a big day ahead of you." And with that, he gently closed the door behind him. As he exited, Lily felt butterflies in her stomach. She wasn't sure if it was due to hunger or excitement, but she was eagerly awaiting the outcome of the piece. This was her chance at a better life. She ran herself a bath, and not long afterwards, fell into a relaxed and blissful sleep. The next morning, Lily woke up more refreshed than she had in a long time. Her bed back at home was not comfortable at all, and the bed she'd been provided with was as soft as sleeping on a cloud. Perhaps this is the lifestyle she could look forward to in the future. Now, after dressing, she made her way through Lily RAL quarters back to the studio, where Arthur was already setting up the materials for the plaster molds. He greeted her with a silent smile and gestured for her to sit down in a chair in the center of the room. "I've been awaiting this moment for weeks," Arthur said. "Let's start with your head and shoulders." He continued, gently repositioning her in the wooden chair. "This will be the most challenging part, my dear. You need to try your best to remain perfectly still while the plaster sets. But don't fret. I'll be here to guide you." Arthur carefully applied a layer of petroleum jelly to her skin to peel Lily and the plaster from sticking, and then began to slowly apply the wet plaster strips over her face, neck, and shoulders. The sensation was strange and slightly uncomfortable. The strips were cold, and it almost felt claustrophobic. "How Lily are?" Lily remained still, trusting Arthur's expertise. As the plaster began to harden, Arthur continued to speak softly to her, calmly explaining the process and keeping her calm throughout. The cadence of his voice was almost hypnotic. She had to fight test Lily RL times to not just fall asleep in the chair. Once the mold was set, he carefully removed it, our Lily ailing a perfect impression of her features. Lily was amazed at the L of detail captured in the mold. "Yes, excellent," Arthur said, meticulously examining the mold with a satisfied smile. "You did marvelously, my dear. I'll need to take a few more sets, as, unfortunately, the process can damage them. But that shouldn't be an issue for someone like you." Lily sat there on the hard chair with a smile plastered on her face. Her unconscious picked up on something deep in the recesses of her mind since she'd met him. He hadn't used her name once. No doubt, it was just a personal quirk of his. She dismissed the thought as soon as it surfaced. The process continued for the rest of the day, taking cast after cast of her face and shoulders. It might not sound too demanding to sit in a chair motionless for hours, but by the end of the day, her back was aching. Later that afternoon, Lily explored the rest of the mansion, marveling at the decadent artwork and opulent decor. She noticed that Arthur clearly had a penchant for collecting sculptures and statues. She was struck by how lifelike some of them were, almost as if she could feel a soul exuding from them. This must be why he was so infamous and respected as an artist. There was something different about his works. As she wandered from room to room, she stumbled upon a closed door at the end of a long and dark hallway. There was no natural light here instead. It was shadowy and dingy. She spun on her heels to turn back, but curiosity got the better of her. She approached the door and tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Just as she was about to turn away, Arthur appeared behind her. "Oh, my dear, I see you found my private gallery," he said, his tone playful yet with a serious undertone. "It's where I keep my most prized pieces. Perhaps one day, I'll give you a tour, but for now, let's focus on the task at hand." Lily nodded, feeling a slight unease at his sudden change in demeanor. That unconscious thought that surfaced previously was louder now, but again, she dismissed it. Any artist would feel stressed from creating a new work. It's completely understandable. As time went on, Lily and Arthur grew closer. She found herself opening up to him, sharing her dreams and aspirations, while he or Lily led more to her about his artistic philosophy and the inspiration behind his sculptures. On the third and final evening, after an especially grueling and tiring session in the studio, Arthur invited Lily to join him for dinner in his grand dining room. The majestic table was set with fine china and crystal glasses, with the main meal being prepared by Arthur's private chef. Before they started to eat, Arthur raised a glass of the finest red wine and proposed a toast. "To the finest muse in the world, my dear, thank you so much for allowing me to use you for my art. The end product will truly be the best I've Lily are created. I feel one for the ages." They both talked and laughed, enjoying each other's company for the first time since arriving at the mansion. Lily felt completely at ease. That nagging voice at the back of her head was now no more than a whimper, and she was starting to see Arthur as a friend. After dinner, Arthur quickly excused himself to take a phone call, leaving Lily all by herself in the dining room. Without the warming sound of laughter, the dining room felt incredibly harsh and cold. It was as if any noise was being sucked out of the room, so much so that she could hear her heartbeat and her shallow breathing. As she continued to sip her wine, which was the best wine she'd tasted, she couldn't shake the feeling of curiosity that overwhelmed her a day or two ago about the locked gallery. As much as she tried to focus on other things, her mind kept drifting back to it. She was helpless, considering this was the last night she'd be spending with Arthur. She reasoned to herself that she would and Lily have this opportunity again, so with a sigh, she came to the decision that she needed to take another look. She wouldn't be able to forgive herself if she didn't. As the floor was marble, there were no creaking floorboards to worry about, much to Lily's relief. She lifted herself from her chair, careful not to make a sound, and crept out of the room. She quietly made her way down the maze of hallways, going by memory until she found a locked door again. To her surprise, the door was slightly ajar. Glancing behind her quickly to ensure that there was no one else around, she tentatively pushed the door open and stepped inside. The gallery was dimly lit, a far cry from the bright and extravagant lighting in the other rooms of the mansion. Numerous candles were lit on the tables spread around the room, casting eerie, dark shadows on the walls. Lily struggled to hold in her awed amazement as she scanned around the room with her widening eyes. The gallery was filled with sculptures and busts, each one more lifelike than the last. The heads and shoulders of various women, some with their hands and arms too, were displayed on lavish pedestals. Their expressions were frozen in time. They were absolutely beautiful, and Lily knew that these must have all been similar models that had worked with Arthur previously. If her work of art was to be anywhere near the quality of these, she'd be very pleased. Something caught Lily's eye. How Lily are. In the glow of candlelight, she saw a reflection come from one of the busts. It was a young woman with a flowing blonde wig, which looked like real hair. Her features were graceful and elegant, with defined cheekbones and a feminine chin. What caught her attention, though, was a glassy reflection from the bust sides. Arthur had done such an amazing job, it honestly looked like the model was really standing there. Lily edged closer and closer to the bust as she approached. She could see the azure blue eyes that were set into the eye sockets of the bust. The candlelight was dancing within them. It was beautiful. Arthur truly was a one of a kind artist to take Lily something like this. She gingerly reached out to touch the cheek of the piece, her fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface. Suddenly, a voice behind her made her jump. "What are you doing in here, my dear?" She turned to see Arthur standing in the doorway, his face a mask of anger and disappointment. "Sorry, I was curious. I couldn't resist seeing your private collection." "I'm sorry," she stammered. Arthur's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained hard and cold. "I told you this room was off limits. These pieces are very personal to me. I give a piece of myself to each, and Lily are one of them. They represent years of hard work and dedication." "I'm sorry, Arthur," Lily said, feeling a knot of fear in her stomach. "I didn't mean to intrude." With that, Arthur sighed and stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Oh yes. I suppose it's only natural to be curious. These pieces are indeed special. I pour my heart and soul into each of them, making sure to capture Lily R1 in detail. These pieces have soul, my dear. They're more than just works of art. They're a testament to the miracle of creation, the fragile, simple beauty of the human form. They're amazing, Arthur. Truly amazing," Lily said. "I hope my piece will be just as perfect." A wide smile formed across Arthur's well-defined face. In that moment, he looked the happiest that he'd been since she met him. I'm confident that yours will be the best yet. As before, he placed his hand upon her back and ushered her out of the room, taking her back to the guest room. He stood in the doorway for a brief moment before shutting the door. Tomorrow, my dear, not long to go now. Lily lay in bed, unable to sleep. Her mind was filled with the images of the lifelike busts, and the previous thoughts from her unconscious were now screaming at her. Something wasn't right. She had to satisfy her curiosity and find out the truth. Looking at the clock, it was just after 2 and the mansion was completely silent. Grabbing her phone for light, she slowly opened the door and made her way back to the mysterious gallery. Luckily, it seemed as though Arthur was so concerned with showing her back to her room that he neglected to lock the door. She slipped inside and shut the door behind her softly. This time, the gallery was pitch black. Lily could feel her breathing start to quicken. She didn't really are like the dark. Lily are since she was a young child. Unlocking her phone, she turned on the flashlight. It cast a precise, bright white beam across the room, the light glinting off the eyes of the bust that caught her attention earlier in the day. She cautiously approached the artwork with her phone, beginning to shake in her hand. In this light, the realistic eyes on the bust seemed almost sad. As she examined the bust further, she noticed something that she hadn't seen before. The dim light in the gallery served to hide these details previously but were now painfully obvious. With the bright lights from her phone, she saw tiny, almost imperceptible seams running along the edges of the piece. Her heart pounded in her chest as it dawned on her what they were: surgical incisions. The horrible truth began to dawn on her: these weren't just lifelike sculptures. They were real human body parts, preserved and displayed as art. She came to the sobering and terrifying realization that Arthur had been using real women models like her to create his masterpieces, capturing their beauty in the most macabre way possible. Lily felt a surge of adrenaline. Her body was in panic mode. Lily, all white fiber of her being, was screaming at her to get out of there, to escape before she became his next unfortunate victim. As she was about to turn to leave, she saw the familiar dull orange glow in the bust's size. The door had been opened. "My dear, I see you've discovered the secret to my art," he said, his voice now cold and devoid of all emotion. "I'd hoped you wouldn't find out until it was too late, but I suppose it was inevitable." "Arthur, please," Lily begged, her voice trembling in fear. "Let me go. I won't tell anyone. I swear." Arthur calmly shook his head and grinned. "I'm afraid I can't do that, dear. You see, you are the final piece in my collection. My perfect muse, the one who will complete my vision of truly timeless beauty." Lily's mind raced as she desperately tried to think of a way out. She glanced around the room, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. Her eyes fell on a heavy sculpture on a nearby pedestal. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, she lunged for the sculpture and swung it at Arthur with all of her strength. The heavy piece struck him cleanly on the side of the head, and he stumbled backward, dazed. Lily didn't waste a second. She ran past him and down the hallway. She knew that she had to go through the dining room if she was to escape. She'd built a good understanding of the layout of the mansion in her short time here. Shoving the door open to the dining room with an almighty bang, she sprinted to the other side of the dining room, to the opposite door. Turning the doorknob frantically, it wouldn't budge. She let out a scream of frustration as she tried pointlessly to open the door. She felt a sharp pinprick in her neck. Turning around, she saw the chef that had cooked their meal earlier in the day. He was holding a syringe in his hand. with an ice-cold feeling enveloping her whole body. Her vision began to fade before falling to the ground. Then complete blackness. Muffled noises could be heard, as if submerged underwater. After a short while, the words began to take form and become clearer. "Are you awake, my dear?" Lily's vision was blurred, and she struggled to see the vague shape in front of her. But there was no mistaking that voice, Arthur. Lily tried to speak, but all that came out of her mouth was a weak groan. She couldn't form any words. "I may be a supremely talented artist, dear, but I don't have the skill to use it in the proper way. The kind of precision that a top chef would have. I couldn't do it without him. I create the vision, and he provides me with the materials." She could feel him brush her cheek. She tried to pull her head away, but to her terror, she couldn't move a muscle. Arthur continued, "Many artists use marble and stone for their creations, all products of Mother Nature. Why am I so different? Why should I not use the epiphany of evolution to create a masterpiece? Are we not also products of Mother Nature? She's given me such wonderful materials, surely. It would be an affront to God if I were not to use them." A tear formed from the corner of her eye and began to roll down her cheek. She could now feel his hand beneath her chin. "Please, my dear, don't fret. The vast majority of humankind are lost to time and space after a cruelly short time on this earth. They are not remembered. Your natural beauty will now be immortalized for Lilyar. You should be thanking me. The specter of aging will not threaten you now. You shall be for Lilyar young, my greatest creation." Arthur's voice continued to drone on, her consciousness fading. She struggled against the overwhelming weight of the paralyzing agent, but her body betrayed her, remaining motionless. "But I'm not so cruel as to have you suffer for my art. Thank you, Lily, thank you." As she realized that he had finally used her name, she felt another sharp pinprick in her neck. The familiar coldness swept throughout her body as her vision began to dim once more, ultimately giving into the encroaching darkness. Weeks later, visitors filed into the mansion. The exhibition sold out in minutes. It was the first time that Arthur Pascal had been seen in public for decades. Only the richest luminaries could afford tickets. There were glasses and bottles of champagne as far as the eye could see. "Welcome, esteemed guests." Arthur's voice resonated through the grand hall. The distinguished crowd fell into a hush, hanging on to his Lilyar word. "Tonight, you will witness the culmination of my life's work, an exhibition that transcends the boundaries of art, humanity, and nature." The attendees, dressed in extravagant gowns and tailored suits, moved in awe through the gallery, marveling at the lifelike sculptures and whispering in hushed tones about the brilliance of Arthur's genius. Arthur guided them to the centerpiece of his collection. "Ladies and gentlemen, my entire life has led me to this moment. The moment when I lay bare the simple beauty of Mother Nature. The same Mother Nature that has given birth to all of us and allowed us to mold the world in her image." With a theatrical flourish, Arthur pulled away the cloth. Our Lily laying a bust of Lily. Her face was serene, captured in an eternal moment of grace, yet with an imperceptible sorrow. The audience gasped in admiration. A nameplate of etched gold lay in front of the piece, simply titled Lily. "Behold," Arthur announced, Lily, my ultimate muse, my Lily, our lasting masterpiece." The room erupted in applause. The guests, oblivious to the horror that lay beneath the surface, marveled at the piece. Arthur's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, knowing his secrets would remain concealed within the marble-like facade. Lily's eyes, now fixed and glassy, could only watch as she became immortalized as Arthur Pascal's most famous art piece. Her sorrow for Lily are visible on her perfect, unaging face. The stories have been told, but their shadows will continue to haunt our minds. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Hauntings and Horrors. Turn on notifications so you won't miss any thrilling horror stories. Good night and sweet dreams.